Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. This is a Ukraine news update, second part thereof for the 11th of August 2024. I'm just getting in from having my face melted off by the sun and boiling inside my skin. So just taking a very quick 20 to give you the military aid and geopolitics update for today. A couple of days worth of stuff, but really not a lot of stuff. It is interesting that I think the geopolitical news is being strangled by what's going on in Kursk, and also I think not a lot is just going on internationally with regard to Ukraine. I think maybe Ukraine is receiving what they're receiving, some stuff from the US and regular ammunition and equipment from the West in general. They're just getting on and doing their training and what they're doing in Kursk, and trying to hold the Russians on the eastern front lines, while the international community isn't. The Olympics is on, it's summertime, so there aren't parliaments meeting as much summertime in many parts of the world, and so I just think there isn't an awful lot going on, as well as there being a kind of strangled information space with Kursk is taking up so much bandwidth, and for all the right reasons. It's some great success, taking up a lot of bandwidth with in the sorts of places that you and I hang out, not necessarily in mainstream media. I haven't been at home to watch, say, the BBC News or Sky News or whatever news channel in your country. It'd be interesting to see whether Kursk is featuring. It is, on some of the newspapers, it is being talked about. I don't know whether it's being given the prominence it probably deserves. Anyway, military aid. Lithuanian supplied M577 command post carriers have been seen in Ukrainian service moving through Russia's Kursk Oblast with Ukrainian troops on top. That's good news. Lithuania supplied a number of M577s to Ukraine. That's what they would otherwise look like. Some command carriers there being used. So thank you, Lithuania. Now, the US aid package has just gone through. There are some differences between that and the previous aid packages that I think indicate that they are getting quite a lot of ram shells. These anti-armor mine shells are ones that explode and mines come out and litter the environment, so that you can use artillery to lay mines basically and fire behind. Even if the enemy has advanced, they've cleared the mine, cleared the fields, or cleared a path of mines, and they are working on a contact line maybe, and you then fire some artillery rounds with these ram shells with their mines behind the opposition, and then they do what they do and retreat and then go into these minefields that they've just cleared, right? And so they're very useful. They're getting more of those from the Americans. 50 multi-mission radars has gone into more than 50 multi-mission radars. So again, 10,000 more anti-armor mine shells and more multi-mission radars. So it should be useful for the Ukrainians. Now, Ukraine has reached its 1 million drone goal early, with 96% of those drones being made locally. That is insane. That's 1 million a year. Smart policies and anti-corruption efforts have saved 3.3 billion hryvnias while delivering over 18,000 drones to the military, writes Mikhailo Fedorov in an exclusive piece for United 24. So United 24 is the kind of government-run charity that's raising huge amounts of money in order to purchase and procure drones. And drones are coming in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So here's a Hornet Queen from Wild Hornets. It can carry 6 plus kilograms, and as such, it's a good method of retrieving objects. Here, they've attached a powerful magnet to the drone, and they're picking up, in this case, a very useful gun. So Ukrainian soldiers have found an unusual use for the Hornet Queen, searching for and collecting weapons on the battlefield using a magnet. Pretty good innovation there going on for the Ukrainians. Samuel Bender, who's a bit of a drone expert, says, "I did not have this on my bingo card. These machines still need significant operator supervision and direction, but we may learn more from this actual combat use than from many controlled tests using such dogs in other countries." So here, talking about robot dogs being used by the Ukrainian military at the front. Supposedly, their task is surveillance of Russian positions, detection of mines, and transportation of up to 7 kilograms of cargo. The charge lasts for 2 hours. So that's really good good news. Again, more evidence of Ukrainian innovation. We've seen these dogs over the years. It's Boston Dynamics, isn't it, producing stuff like this, and now more and more companies. We've seen Chinese soldiers start to use these. I've seen them sort of training with these and whatnot. So good to see that Ukrainians are getting hold of them and using them, hopefully for good, for good outcomes and whatnot. Now, NATO is supposedly, quote, prepared to deliver a swift and severe response if Iran goes ahead with the plan set to send hundreds of satellite-guided close-range ballistic missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine. So there's this news that Iran's going to give Russia, or sell Russia, or whatever, provide Russia with hundreds of these ballistic missiles. That could be really challenging. It's interesting that the missile that hit the hospital in Kiev, the children's hospital, was very recently made. I should have something on that, but I don't. No, I don't. But it was really recently made. In other words, it looks like Russia is just basically using what they manufacture, like straight up. They've gone through their strategic reserves, which, if that's the case, or maybe they're keeping strategic reserves and not using those and just still using what they're producing. But it does, I think, indicate that Russia is in probably a lot more trouble than otherwise thought with regard to the number of missiles they have. Because if they get involved in another, say, a war with NATO somewhere else, or a war with someone else somewhere else, what are the reserves they have to be able to use? I don't think they can commit to more than one campaign at the moment, which is one of the, for example, how the US military strategizes for each and every year. They need to, I think they work on being able to commit to several campaigns at once, etc., etc. The Russians, I just don't think, could do that. But anyway, these Iranian missiles are possibly going to be on the way to Russia, and NATO is saying, look, that will bring about severe consequences. However, it appears that Russia is using North Korean missiles at the moment, the KN-23 ballistic missile. So what's going on with that, and what's the answer from NATO and the UN concerning North Korea's supply of weapons to Russia? Okay, here we have a thread from Tom Warner, if true. So this is a former Ukraine correspondent. This is in response to Anton Gerashchenko. Let's go to where Anton Gerashchenko was talking first. So Russian commanders, he says, refuse to move conscript soldiers to the rear in Kursk region. They are considered a combat unit, according to Russian Agentstvo media. According to the media, the unit consisting of conscripts receives battle orders, and their commanders refuse to move them to the rear. There has been no confirmation that conscripts already have taken part in combat. Families of many conscripts in Kursk region reported that they cannot contact them at the moment. A Russian petition to remove conscripts from Kursk region has gathered about 3,500 signatures. Now, conscripts shouldn't be used. They certainly can't be used abroad. So the Russians are not supposed to be able to use conscripts. When you have your national conscription and you do a year's service or whatever it is, you're not allowed to send them to war zones abroad. But I don't know whether they are technically allowed to use them within the Russian territories there. But anyway, that's seen as deeply unpopular. And Tom Warner says, look, if this is true, if Russia deliberately uses conscripts to hold the fronts against Ukraine's incursion, then for the first time, these conscripts are a big part of this war. So let's talk about what makes conscripts so different from Mobics and also so different from Soviet-era conscripts. Okay. Since 2008, Russia has had mostly a professional army. That changed in the autumn of 2022 when Putin was forced to admit the initial ground forces of about 200,000 professional soldiers weren't enough for this war. So he ordered a mobilization of 300,000 more fighters, hence the Mobics. Mobics were mostly middle-aged, mostly with limited military experience, and Mobics were mostly lousy fighters, reluctantly pushed into the deadliest jobs. But after nearly 2 years of high attrition, the survivors are experienced fighters as good as professional soldiers. Conscripts, or prizivniks, are younger men without prior military experience. They're called up in semi-annual drafts, which have been a regular thing in Russia since forever ago. And at least till now, conscripts have not deliberately been used to fight in the Ukraine war. I mean, there were some this is me talking now, there were some very early reports in this war in 2022 that there were some conscripts that kind of, scare quotes, accidentally found themselves in Ukraine being sent over the border. But I don't know that that's wholly confirmed. To understand the conscript role, he continues, we have to start in the Soviet era. Then conscription was the means of recruiting for the armed forces. All privates were conscripts, and they all served 2 years. Everyone got the same mediocre level of training. After the Soviet Empire fell, Yeltsin floated plans to reform Russia's military into a Western-style professional force, but there was so much pushback, nothing happened until 2008. What Putin finally did was a compromise halfway reform into a hybrid, mostly professional force. Since then, when young men are drafted, they offered a choice between signing a 2-year contract as a professional soldier with decent pay by Russian standards, or serving a 1-year term as a conscript, barely paid, and only the contract soldiers get serious training. Why did Putin hang on to conscription? Mainly corruption. Russian parents pay a lot more to keep their boys out of conscription, and the poor boys whose parents can't afford to keep them out of conscription are practically free labor. I've told you before that conscripts are used to tackle wildfires in the wildfire season in Russia, and that's a problem that Russia has suffered because there's been no one to deal with these wildfires, and they've been able to spread rampantly due to these conscripts being involved with defending the borders and involved in the war. What this reform did was create a two-class system in the military. Contractors who didn't mind spending extra time on are willing to be trained to fight, and conscripts who would rather go nearly unpaid and do the lowest grunt work to get out of the army as soon as possible. That largely explains why when Putin launched this war, he left the conscripts at home. They had hardly any training, and they're made very clear that they weren't inclined to military service. Also, Putin feared the conscript mother activism that arose during the Afghan wars. So part of the reason why the Afghan war stopped is people were coming back in body bags, and mothers were complaining about that, particularly, it appears, conscripts. So what are conscripts going to do now they're finding themselves at the front of Ukraine's incursion? We've seen that what will probably be the main answer, surrender en masse, sometimes so many, it will slow Ukraine down just processing them all. And this is what we've seen here are a number of videos and stills of prisoners of war being taken in Kursk. And just today, I've seen a whole host more. I mean, there's talk that maybe 1,000 POWs have been taken in Kursk alone, and a lot of these are conscripts. It wouldn't surprise me if that's true. I've seen that many videos now. But also, some will be getting killed. This is one of the tweets I started with, which I'll just repeat here. Actually, he's hardly the first conscript gets killed in the war. Many have died serving on warships, e.g. the Moskva, and a few other ways. So that's a good point, actually. I've forgotten that. On the Moskva, when the Moskva was sunk, there were claims that many of those who perished were conscripts, naval conscripts. And here's that Anton Gerashchenko tweet was about these conscripts here, or this conscript here. It remains to be seen who has died. It remains to be seen how many conscripts will be used. What we have clear evidence for so far could be accidental. They happen to be manning positions that weren't expected to be attacked. Apparently, many conscripts are serving as border guards. There are some 250,000 conscripts spread around various armed services, of which maybe 100,000 are in the MOD ground forces, and of those, only a small fraction are located in Kursk and Belgorod Oblast. But with prisons largely emptied of men willing to sign it in exchange for pardons, the recruiting of contract professionals getting increasingly expensive, perhaps the MOD might be considering wider use of conscripts. It seems a 22-year-old pictured in Gerashchenko's tweet was not actually a conscript, according to this account. Known for diligent research, he was a rare type of contractor with a provision in his contract that he wouldn't be sent to Ukraine. So that is a bit of a late correction to that. Another surrender video today reported as conscript. So yeah, just another video there to add to that. And this one from earlier, huge row of Russian POWs being taken, lined up down that road. So it remains to be seen whether this will be an issue, whether conscripts dying and being captured will produce pushback from Russian families and parents. One would hope so. That would be fantastic if you had something similar to what happened in the Afghan war, but yeah, we shall see. Anyway, moving on to some scant geopolitical news. Firstly, Germany must be prepared for war in 5 years. That is a warning of a commander of the Hamburg Regional Command, Michael Giss. Bundeswehr has already been begun developing an operational plan, Germany, anticipating that Russia may attack NATO countries by 2029. We've heard this before, and there have been several reports coming out. The Polish reported on, was it 3 years they were talking about? Germany, I think previously we were talking about 6 years. It is apparent that many European nations are worried enough of the threat of Russia that they are saying we need to have definite plans in place. NATO has started making sure, or not started, they are, yeah, they are just making sure that their operational plans are in place in case of a NATO engagement with Russia, and that includes how they would get armies across Europe, the logistics involved in such a pursuit. So NATO are hopefully becoming as prepared as possible. Other nations, individual nations, need to be prepared, and those are the warnings of certain people in the know. Okay, then we have Russia's economy is stagnating, according to Yanis Kluger. The latest GDP figures are misleading, with year-over-year growth at 4%. You wouldn't think that Russian GDP actually slightly fell since last October. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, GDP has grown by just 0.8% per year on average. I mean, the problem with trying to work out what's going on with Russia is that their figures are either not being publicized anymore, they've stopped publicizing many of their government stats, or they're just making stuff up. And so, yeah, very difficult to work out. But this, according to this graph, it looks to be that big drop in March 2022. Yes, it looks to be going up, but it's going up at a rate that's below where it would have been had they not invaded. I mean, I think the decision to go to war by Putin and his cronies will go down as one of the worst geopolitical decisions ever. And here we have Ilya Ponomarenko, the former Kiev Independent journalist and author, saying there's something unspeakably beautiful about the fact that Russia is crying out to the international community now that war of aggression of its own making has spilled into Russian territory. So as a result of Kursk being invaded by the Ukrainians, sorry, the Russians are going to the UN and to everyone like, oh, please help us. Oh, this is terrible. Oh my goodness, I can't believe, no. It's like, you've been invading Ukraine for 10 years, you bunch of muppets. Like, how dare you complain about the Ukrainians? And actually, Ukraine is invading into Kursk, but there are reports that they're treating the locals really well. They're opening shops back up. They're trying, allowing them back on the internet. I think even possibly allowing comms back up, but showing them Ukrainian TV or stuff. So, like, it's all. But the idea is that they're treating people from Kursk really, really well. It's in their best interest to do so. And there's a traditional, you could argue that Kursk is traditionally more part of Ukraine than it is Russia. But anyway, I digress. Also, it's priceless to see Russia go and complain to America every time Ukraine hits back really hard. The most idiotic and absurd war ever. Yeah, there have been these complaints to America of like, when Ukraine do things like this, and often America is not. I think it's because they think that America's behind these attacks, but America, it appears, didn't know anything about this Kursk attack or wasn't like fully informed. Anyway, I've already talked to you about Elon Musk and Twitter and his attack on the UK. I mean, if you go and look at Elon Musk's Twitter feed, it's just all attacks on Britain and freedom of speech. The reason I mention this again, I mean, he is obsessed with freedom of speech, but of course, it's not free at all. It's free if you agree with what he thinks and says, but otherwise it's not that free. And some people are far freer than others, including Elon Musk himself and David Sachs and all the people he likes who are pro-Russian. So yeah, it's freedom of speech if you're kind of pro-Russian. This kind of picture, he's now really claiming that the UK is in a civil war and it's all like against white people in the UK and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Really whipping up anti-immigration sentiments. It's not to say there aren't these issues there, right? But some people are saying, well, are you saying that these fractures don't exist? Yes, they do. But if you're fanning the flames, then if a house is burning down and it burns down, like, you're unable to control the fire because someone's fanning it, or throwing gasoline on the fire in your house, then that person has to take some responsibility for your house burning down. Well, Britain's house was burning down, and you've got you've got Elon Musk there throwing gasoline on the fire, saying, "Yeah, yeah, look at Britain, civil war," as he allows his platform to be utilised by ne'er do wells and have disinformation spread unabridged across the platform. It is dangerous, but yeah, uh, interesting. So. Yeah, let's go across to Chris Owicki here. So replying to someone who's kind of very pro, Musk, saying all the papers today across the political spectrum have run pieces criticizing Musk. So this is what's happened in the UK. This consensus worries me far more than anything I see on this platform. Chris Owicki says this poster has it right in the first sentence at least. Literally every UK newspaper from the Daily Telegraph hard right to the Guardian centre left has published articles damning Elon Musk. I don't think he realises how much damage he's done to the whole of social media. It's surely inevitable now that there will be a crackdown on social media companies in the UK. So why I'm saying this, what's this got to do with Ukraine? Well, actually, there's a lot to do with Ukraine because he allows Russian disinformation to go rife and he holds back pro-Ukrainian voices through the coding. Now, if there is a change to the legislation that affects Twitter, then actually, where a lot of us get our information from will be affected. Hopefully, positively. Hopefully, something will be done about the troll farms and the bot farms that are freely operating across Twitter, which was so ironic because one of the reasons he tried to pull out, one of the reasons he gave for trying to pull out of buying Twitter, he was forced to buy Twitter in the end because he put this offer in, and part of that was a legally binding um, acquisition of Twitter. Like he couldn't pull out. He had signed up to it. But one of the ways he tried to pull out was saying that there were too many fake accounts on there, that there were as many as 5% fake accounts. And then he took over and he's allowed gazillions of fake accounts to exist by taking away all the moderators. So he's taken away the moderation, and now it's worse than it was before. And that's what he's complaining about. That's why he didn't want to buy it. So it's just incredible. Anyway, it's surely inevitable now, says Chris Owicki, that there will be a crackdown on social media companies in the UK, Ireland, and where most of them have their EU headquarters, has already said that. Oh, sorry, in the UK. Ireland, where most of them have their EU headquarters, has already said there'll be a crackdown there. And this is because there were race riots that took place there as a result of disinformation in almost the same way as the Southport and other riots that happened since Southport as a result of disinformation of a story that the Russians propagated. This is exactly what happened in Ireland. So Ireland are onto this as well. Already said there'll be a crackdown there, and you can bet that Brussels will be observing them with great interest. Well, we've already heard from the EU report that Twitter is the worst offender with regard to disinformation. Yes, TikTok, yes, Facebook, but Twitter is the worst. Facebook, etc., are run by business-minded people, so I expect they'll comply with the new rules that will be coming. Elon is so bonkers by now, though, that I strongly suspect he'll either try to defy the UK and EU or simply pull the plug despite the cost. I think Elon Musk has just he's lost the plot now, and this is no longer, I think, a business decision. He's tried to sue the advertisers who have pulled out, and now more advertisers are pulling out. So Twitter could just go tits up anytime soon, or he might just try and continue to bankroll it because it's his little plaything, and it becomes part of this conspiracy theory world full of ideologues of the same political bent as him. It wouldn't surprise me if he just backs this wrong horse and just keeps doing that in a kind of sunk cost fallacy approach. Now, there are, you can go and check all of the newspaper articles here, all across the spectrum here, reporting on, Elon Musk accused by the Prime Minister of the UK of exacerbating UK tensions on X in wake of riots. Elon Musk's comments, Twitter comments criticised by UK amid riots. CNN, Elon Musk says civil war is inevitable as UK rocked by far right riots. He's part of the problem. Forbes, Elon Musk boosted fake headline about UK detainment camps amid criticism of UK handling of riots. Independent, why Elon Musk is taking on Keir Starmer over UK's far right riots. Outlook, not acceptable. UK government slams Elon Musk's civil war comment on riots, so on and so forth. The Daily Mail or Mail Online, social media companies warned by Ofcom, the UK regulator, to remove any online violence which could fuel the UK riots, as Elon Musk accused of fanning the flames of hate over those riots, etc., etc. So there's a load of media from all ends of the spectrum, wading in on this. Anyway, Kiev Independent, this is fascinating. Kiev Independent reports, and it's exactly what I said should have happened previously. If Trump had done this before he selected JD Vance and got someone in as his VP pick who wasn't so avowedly anti-Ukraine, he could have attracted those Haley voters, Nikki Haley voters, even more, those Reagan Republicans that he's now losing to the Democrats. So some experts and Ukraine watchers say Trump could now lift his chances by reversing course to look stronger on the world stage than Putin, by presenting himself as more capable of helping Ukraine than Harris. I think this would be very sensible of him. I don't think he would do it because the people around him are so mental and are deeply anti-Ukraine. I don't think Trump himself is too much. I think I did do a video on this, that he has got relations to, and financial relations to, Russia that I think are compromising, and he has been broadly anti-Ukraine for a long time now, if you trace it back in time. And his family are deep, like Don Trump Jr. is compromised by Russia 100%. But I think Trump is quite vacuous and can be swayed on these things if the right people around him were in a position to do so. But the people around him are deeply pro-Russian and anti-Ukraine, as far as I can work out. And so, although this would be a good idea for Trump, I don't foresee this actually happening because he just doesn't have the right people around him. But yeah, and yeah, I was going to talk about like headlines here about Twitter and Elon Musk again. Jess Phillips, who's a Labour politician, calls Twitter a place of misery as she vows to scale back her own use. But anyway, so it's going to be interesting to see how social media, to see if there is a social media crackdown in the UK, in Ireland, and in the EU. And I think there will be. I think something does have to be done. And don't give me the whole freedom of speech stuff, because you look at the philosophical arguments for this. It's untenable to have the complete freedom of speech. I've gone through all these arguments before. Just go and search on my videos for freedom of speech, and you'll find the videos I've done on that. I don't want to rerun that here and waste your time, but it is untenable to have 100% free speech. Elon Musk calls himself a free speech absolutist, and a free speech absolutist is completely untenable. Just very simply, just before I go, you wouldn't have a 12-year-old kid standing up in class and shouting swear words and racial abuse at a teacher and think that's acceptable. You legislate against that. You have rules against that in the classroom. If that happens, you're out the school, you're suspended, or if that's curtailing free speech. You don't have TV having pornography so that your 5-year-old kids can watch pornography in the daytime. So what you do is you moderate that, and you have the watershed in the UK is past 9 o'clock. You can't have swearing on TV before 9 o'clock. That is curtailing free speech. If you disagree with that, then okay, it's free for all. You can say whatever you like on TV, and you can have disinformation fly about. And the problem is, it's not good enough to say, oh, we should be able to discern ourselves the difference between disinformation. People can't do that. People are not intelligent enough, not knowledgeable enough, or don't have the time to do that. And so therefore, you have to have entities do that moderation on behalf of people, so that they are not fed stuff when they are particularly susceptible to be lied to. It is not good enough to say, oh, we should just be able to do that, freedom of speech, because we don't. We do it badly. Like, look at human psychology and understand that unabated, 100% freedom of speech is dangerous. And when it's used to literally cause death and to cause harm, like when we have riots on the streets of the UK that have been propagated, facilitated, fanned by, scare quotes, freedom of speech, by disinformation that should have been caught and shut down, then we have problem. We need to deal with disinformation. Don't give me the old freedom. All freedom of speech advocates do in these cases is argue that they can say offensive things to other people and get away with it. That's really what they want to do. Or they're Russian trolls that want Russia to be able to say what they like, to be able to manipulate other populations. That is, in my definition of the word war, that is hybrid war. That's information war that Russia is waging on us. And we can sit back, roll over, and let them do whatever they like to us, or we stand up and say, no, we need to deal robustly with disinformation because it's dangerous. Anyway, rant over. I haven't had a rant for a long time. I said I wouldn't say anything on freedom of speech. Anyway, there's far more on that. You can go and look at the philosophical underpinnings of my arguments there by, as I say, searching for my freedom of speech videos on this channel. Take care, guys. Speak soon. Toodle pips.